Today, we're going to unpack a really powerful theory that goes way beyond simple personality labels like introvert or extrovert. We're going to get into what really drives our behavior, why it changes so much depending on the situation, and, most importantly, how you can use this to understand yourself a whole lot better. So, let me just ask you something to get us started. Are you the exact same person in every single situation? I mean, think about it. If you see yourself as an extrovert, what about those moments when you just want to be quiet and listen? Or if you're an introvert, when do you suddenly become the life of the party? It's that variation, that chameleon like nature of our personality that we're going to dive into today. You can think of it like this. The old school trait theories, they give you a single snapshot of yourself. They might say, yep, you're pretty conscientious based on your average behavior. But social cognitive theory, or SCT, well, that gives you the whole movie. It doesn't just ask if you're conscientious, it asks when are you conscientious and why does it change? It sees your personality not as some fixed thing, but as this dynamic, living system. Now, this huge shift in thinking didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was really spearheaded by a couple of key figures who looked at the old ideas and said, hang on, there's got to be more to it than just a list of traits. First up, you have the legend himself, Albert Bandura. This guy was an absolute giant in psychology. He's the one who really got us to focus on our inner thoughts. He showed us that we learn so much just by watching other people, and he gave us this incredibly powerful idea that our belief in our own abilities, what he called self-efficacy, is one of the main things driving what we do. And then you've got Walter Mitchell. He was the one who really stirred the pot, challenging this whole idea that we have these fixed traits. He argued that the situation we're in and how we see it is just as important. He's the one who said our real personality isn't some label, but it's found in the consistent patterns of how we act differently from one place to the next. Okay, so let's dig into what is maybe the most important concept from Bandura's work. Seriously, this one idea influences pretty much every goal you set, every risk you take, and every challenge you face. And that idea is perceived self-efficacy. So what does that actually mean? Well, it's not about how skilled you are at something. Not really. It's about whether you believe you can use your skills to get the job done. It's that little voice in your head right before a big interview that says either, you got this, or there's no way you can pull this off. That belief, that's self-efficacy. Now, it is absolutely critical not to get this confused with self-esteem. Self-esteem is that broad overall feeling about yourself. Self-efficacy is totally different. It's specific to a task. That's exactly why you can have crazy high self-efficacy for your job, you know you can nail it, but have super low self-efficacy for, say, learning a new language or trying to fix a leaky faucet. And this brings up a really fascinating distinction. See, it's one thing to want a good outcome. That's an outcome expectation. You believe getting that promotion will make you happy, but it is a completely different thing to believe you have what it takes to actually get the promotion. That's a self-efficacy expectation. And here's the kicker. The research is crystal clear. It's that second belief, that can I really do this part, that predicts whether we even bother to try. And this is exactly why this whole self-efficacy thing is such a game changer. It's not just some fuzzy feeling. It drives what you do. When you have high self-efficacy, you don't just daydream, you actually choose tougher goals. When you hit a wall, you don't just quit, you push harder and you persist longer. You face challenges with less anxiety and more focus. It is pretty much the bedrock of resilience. So how does all this stuff, our beliefs, our actions, the world around us, all fit together? Well, this takes us to a really cool model that doesn't see personality as a thing you have, but as a system that's always in motion. Bandura called this reciprocal determinism, and you can think of it as a constant three-way feedback loop. For example, imagine you have a belief that you're bad at networking. That's the person part. So you avoid networking events. That's your behavior. Because you're never there, you don't make new professional contacts, which shapes your environment. And that environment, where you feel disconnected, just reinforces your original belief that you're bad at it. But here's the powerful part. You are not a passenger. You can jump in and change that loop at any point. Mitchell built on this with his CAPS model. The easiest way to picture this is to think of your personality like a super complex circuit board, full of all your thoughts and feelings. Any given situation, like say your boss giving you unexpected feedback, sends a jolt of electricity through that board, lighting up a very specific pathway of thoughts, feelings, and eventually actions. And what this creates is what he called your if-then personality signature. So the real you isn't some average score on a test. The real you is this unique but stable pattern. The fact that if you're with your close friends, then you're chatty and assertive. But if you get criticized by your boss, then you get quiet and withdrawn. That whole pattern, that consistent variation, that is your personality. Okay, so these are some really big ideas. But where's the proof, right?
Well, a lot of the evidence comes from two of the most famous and, frankly, most interesting experiments in the whole history of psychology.
First, there's Bandora's Bobo doll experiment. It showed us that we can learn just by watching someone else. But it's not as simple as just monkey see, monkey do. It's actually a four-step process. First, you have to pay attention to the behavior. Then you have to retain it, remember it. Third, you have to actually be able to reproduce it physically. And finally, you need the motivation, a reason to do it in the first place. You need all four. And the thing that just blew everyone's minds at the time was that kids learned to be aggressive simply by watching an adult. It was no reward, no punishment, nothing direct. This just flew in the face of all the old theories that said all learning had to come from direct experience. It proved we can learn from what happens to other people.
And then, of course, you have Michelle's marshmallow test. You've all seen the adorable videos, right? A kid gets a marshmallow, they're told they can eat it now, or if they can wait, they'll get two. For decades, this was held up as the ultimate predictor of future success, a pure, simple test of an inner trait we call willpower.
But, and this is a huge but, modern reevaluations tell a totally different story. When scientists replicated the test with more diverse groups of kids, that amazing predictive power, it pretty much vanished. It turns out a kid's choice isn't really about some fixed trait called willpower. It's about their situation. Think about it. If you've grown up in an environment where promises aren't always kept, taking the one marshmallow you can see right now isn't a failure of self-control. It's a perfectly rational decision. All right, this is all fascinating stuff, but what's the bottom line for us? How can we take these huge insights from Bandera and Michelle and actually put them to work in our own lives? Well, one of the most practical things you can do is change how you set your goals. Framing your goals around what you want to approach, like I want to seek out new friendships, is way more motivating and effective than framing them around what you want to avoid, like I want to stop being lonely. Success in an approach goal feels like an accomplishment. Success in an avoidance goal just feels like temporary relief. It's a huge difference. And all of this gets wrapped up in a process called self-regulation. This is basically the engine of personal change. It's you actively setting goals, checking in on your progress based on your own standards, and then adjusting what you're doing. This is how you become the director of your own life, instead of just an actor reading lines somebody else wrote. So let's just boil it all down. The big takeaway here is that you're not stuck. You can actively shape your own path. How? Start by building that self-efficacy. Pick small, manageable tasks you know you can win at, and build that momentum. Frame your goals around what you're moving towards, not what you're running away from. And use those fresh start moments in life, a new year, a new job, even just a Monday, to consciously build better habits. So, we'll leave you with this to think about. Now that you know that your beliefs about what you're capable of are a huge driver of what you actually do, what is the one limiting belief you have about yourself that if you could just change it, would unlock a completely different future for you?